So round 5 of the Rugby Championship is just about here, and with that brings a new challenge for this All Blacks side. They are defending the Bledisloe Cup, a trophy that has been in New Zealand for a very long time, but Australia, they want to take it from them. Razor on a 2-match losing streak. Can he fix it in just a short period of time? In this video, we're going to be predicting what we think Scott Robertson will be going with in this matchup up against Australia. It is myself and Rugbyitch. What is the big thing, Tim, that you feel like we need to see from the All Blacks here in Bledisloe Cup match number 1?
Gosh, that's a tough question.
Just to put you on the spot.
I feel like the most important thing is let's get some tries on the board. I think that's probably the number one thing I can say, because they weren't able to accomplish that within that second test against the Springboks. But I have no doubt they'll be able to do that for what we saw what we saw with that Wallabies Pumas test last week. So I'd like to think they can kind of do something here.
Of course, both of these sides actually coming off losses. Argentina managing to beat the Australians after being down by around that 20-point margin to then come back and beat them by about 40 is quite a phenomenal turnaround for Los Pumas. New Zealand, tryless in their game up against the Springboks. Selections were questioned. So the big question is Razor going to revert back to what he had similar up against the English in the start of this Rugby Championship? Or does he stick with what he changed and try and power through? But for yourself in the front row, who have you gone with as your 1, 2, and 3?
Well, to no surprise here, I've gone with the same front row as what we saw against the Springboks. I have gone with Tamati Williams number 1, Cody Taylor number 2, and Tyrell Lomax at number 3. I think the only player really in doubt, I guess, of losing his place is probably Tamati Williams, because with even the group back kind of in the frame, he can definitely step up there, and he's done that several times with Tyrell Lomax, so they're definitely used to playing with each other there in terms of the props. But I just think Tamati deserves to kind of get a few more minutes under his belt, and I think it just makes sense to kind of slowly get even group back into the setup. Like, I think he's just better maybe coming off the bench, or not, like maybe just you don't play him in this game and you start the next one. Just I think it has to be a slow development. So for now, I think Tamati deserves number 1 jersey, and yeah, same with Cody Taylor and Tyrell Lomax. I thought Cody Taylor, by the way, was outstanding in that second test against the Boks. I thought he was one of the best players really for them. So yeah, I'd like to see him start again.
And just like yourself, I've actually gone with the exact same 3 for my Scott Robertson prediction. Tamati Williams number 1, number 2 Cody Taylor, and then number 3 Tyrell Lomax. Lomax, he was let down a little bit by that late card in that second game up against South Africa, because up till that stage he had been extremely strong, but there were also still those questions of how late were the All Blacks going to use their bench, because Fletcher Null, he was waiting patiently. He's actually picked up an injury now, so he will not be available to come off the bench in this contest. But the question mark of when is the right time to unleash a bench was definitely criticised for Scott Robertson throughout the first and second match up against South Africa. But Lomax, he's one of those players that he's quite the workhorse. He makes a lot of tackles. He has some great running meters as well for a prop. To Mighty Williams in this game, he might be going head-to-head with Tongan Thor, Taniela Tupou, which is once again 2-man mountains going head-to-head, just like it was for Williams versus Malaharba. Cody Taylor, I feel like that game up against South Africa, definitely the second test match, just pretty much was the Cody Taylor performance that a lot of people have been waiting for a very long time. They wanted to see him start getting those running meters. He was throwing accurately in the lineouts. Unfortunately, though, the rest of his side couldn't quite play on that same standard, because honestly, if they did, could have been a whole different ball game in terms of the score. But now we move on to the locking duo. I've gone with the captain, number 4, Scott Barrett. Number 5, Tupou. Now, these two men, there's quite a difference in the way that they're currently playing. I would argue that Scott Barrett at the moment, he is making far too many mistakes for a guy who is as experienced and in such a important position as a lock at the moment. Whereas Tupou, that man's starting to find some of his best form he's ever had in an All Blacks jersey. But Barrett, there was that chance for New Zealand later on in the game. It's not just this moment, by the way, but that one how they had that nice break and then just drops the ball cold, changed the momentum of the game, and that was probably the moment that New Zealand felt that they weren't going to win that contest anymore. But he just hasn't found that same form that he had, I don't believe, as of yet. But that doesn't mean that he can't. It's just he needs more minutes under his belt to then get into that form, because you've got a guy like Sam Derry, and now we saw Patrick Tuipulotu playing for Auckland and he looked pretty decent, scored himself a try. Big Paddy, so he will be on the cusp of coming back in. So you need your skipper to step up, and that's what we need to see up against Australia, even though Barrett has got a record of being a little bit ill-disciplined up against the Aussies.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think Scott Barrett, I actually think he had a decent game actually against the Springboks. I think, he won two, he won 2 balls in the breakdown, I believe, against us, and he did pretty well for that front. I was like, wow, like, it's just the positioning of him. That's the one thing which he just has hands down, he's just nailed. Like, he just knows exactly where to be in terms of his positioning from a defensive point of view. I do agree that, that one kind of blunder he had in terms of later on in the game could have maybe changed the game kind of and how it went. But I think overall, he actually had a decent game. But I do agree that Tupova'i has definitely stepped up on the occasion in terms of Safka, in terms of those 2 tests. And I mean, I actually have made a change here that I believe Scott Robinson will go for. I've gone with Patrick Tuipulotu at the number 4 and Tupova'i at the number 5. And there's a reason behind this, because I think both those two, would be a nice combination against the Aussies. I think Tuipulotu, like you said, it's going to be, I think he's always played well, I think, in Australia. I mean, look, this is me. Maybe this is my knowledge of Super Rugby coming in with the Blues, but he's always looked good. But he's in Australia against any of the opposition there. So I'd like to see Tuipulotu involved, put him straight into that starting lineup, and Tupova'i keeps his place number 5, because I think that's probably his best position, actually, is the number 5 spot, not like the number 4. I mean, he can play number 6 if needed, but I just think number 5 is it's perfect really for him. So that's the 2 I want to see there. And to jump the mark here, just going straight towards the loose forwards, this is where I've gone with Scott Barrett and the number 6 jersey. I think this is where I can see Scott Razor kind of doing something here. I think he can go with 3 locks here. I think it's something which they missed out really against the Springboks, and I'd like to see him kind of try it out within this game. And I think he may have that on his mind when you have someone like Tuipulotu, Vi, who looks brilliant, and you have Scott Barrett, who of course is the captain. Like, why not have all 3 of them involved in the game? So I'd like to see that kind of happen. And then this is where I have gone with Dalton Papali'i at the number 7 jersey. I was considering Sam. I mean, there's a lot of options here. There's Sam Kane. There's even Blackadder, of course. Even Blackadder, he does have a bit of kind of a bit of uncertainty if he is available or not. So that kind of just made it so it was really between Sam Kane and Papali'i. And because Papali'i we didn't get to see him kind of involved in those 2 tests, unfortunately, due to like a thumb injury, I believe. I'd like to see him kind of involved in this game against the Aussies. So that's the reason why he's my number 7. And the number 8 is just, it's Sevilla, hands down. So that's the loose forwards, I guess, some locks I've gone with.
Alrighty, so, okay, you've made quite a few changes compared to what we saw in that last game up against South Africa, shifting Barrett from lock to loose forward, and then also bringing Papali'i back in there as well. But for myself, in the loose forward trio, number 6, this is where I've gone with Wallace Satiti, because I feel like the game that he had up against the Springboks told us what we kind of already knew, anyone who's been watching him for the Chiefs, and that is that he is a phenomenal player when given the opportunity. In the highest pressure games, he is normally the chief that steps up the most. And for such a young player, 22 years of age, he recently had his birthday. I don't know why that's important, but Wallace Satiti is one of those guys who has a very bright future for the All Blacks. And I honestly think that number 6 jersey at the moment, yes, Blackadder's been doing well, but he is also just returning from injury, so perhaps they are a little bit wary of chucking him back in. So I'll keep Satiti there. He played really well up against the Springboks, and I'd like to think that was enough for Scott Robertson to go, so these guys are like informed from Super Rugby. They're actually quite good, it would seem. So maybe we should include a couple more of them. Hint, the back line. Where is Proctor? But nonetheless, we move on to number 7, Sam Kane. Did you say Satutu, mate?
What? No, sorry, no, nothing. Carry on.
Every video, you find a way of putting him in there somewhere. He's eventually going to be maybe in one of our starting lineups or reserves if he ever gets selected in the squad. I think he's going to be more likely to get selected to Fiji, to be honest, than for New Zealand at this point. He's almost had a stand-down time, and they have mentioned that they would be happy to accept Satutu into that flying Fijian side.
I wouldn't want to see that. I wouldn't want to see that. It's like the whole situation kind of similar to what we saw with Peter Gus Simakula, like where he played 1 or 2 caps for the All Blacks, and then they just kind of just didn't use him at all. So I wouldn't want to see that with Hoskins. And I think he's an incredible player. But I think it's interesting actually with Wallace Atiti. Like, I just want to ask you kind of a question here. Like, if you think Wallace Atiti is like kind of the 6 moving forward that the All Blacks should choose, Do you think that could have an impact in terms of like what the Chiefs do in terms of their setup? Because they have something Finau there. He really is probably more of a 6, I'd say, than Satiti in terms of how that system goes. But it's tough because Bola Satiti is such a good player in a number 8 jersey. It's hard to get a number 8 jersey if Sevilla is there. So what do you see on that front?
I think it will be one of those situations how he has to bide his time a little bit. In terms of he'll play 6 for the ABs, perhaps, if that is the direction that they want him to go in. And then when he goes back to Super Rugby, he'll probably be back in that number 8 jersey. Luke Jacobson or Summer Penny Finau, like you said, could take on that 6. Or he could even maybe look at that number 7. I feel like he's young enough and versatile enough that he's probably got potential of taking any of those jerseys and being able to have a solid performance. So that's one good thing about how young he is and the fact that he hasn't got a huge amount of minutes in any given position in that loose forward trio because he can adapt in that regard. But yeah, he's one of those guys that I honestly feel like his physicality and his, I guess, mentality going into that game up against the Springboks, for me, he was one of the standouts throughout the game. Him and Cody Taylor, in terms of that forward back, I think we're both the best players out there on the field. So I'm keeping him at number 6. Number 7, I'm going with an old chief in Sam Cane. I do see Razor kind of giving him a few more contests before he decides to hang up his boots for the ABs. But then you're also in that scenario. Yes, it's nice to give him those minutes, but is this when you should be developing that next guy into your All Blacks side? So maybe that is where we do see Dalton Papali'i. And then number 8, I've gone with Ardie Savia. Until Savia either transitions to 7 or they do decide to give Savia a little bit of a break, I don't see anyone taking that 8 jersey from him, including your man, Hoskins Sotutu. So Savia staying at number 8 for myself, and that is what I think that Scott Robertson will end up doing. Now we move on to the back line for the ABs. Number 9, this is where I have once again given Cortez Ratama the opportunity, and then 10, Damian McKenzie. Now, there are some that are calling for a change in that 10 jersey. They feel like McKenzie maybe hasn't quite been able to have that impact that they first anticipated, but overall, I don't think it was the 9 and 10's fault up against the South Africans in that second game. It just seemed to be a bit lackluster as a whole for New Zealand, making mistakes at crucial times and just not really being able to get themselves into the game. Like I mentioned, one of the first times in a long time that they've actually not scored a try in a contest. So Cortez Ratama at 9, I still think that at the moment he is actually the first choice. After seeing TJ in his last couple games, he's really, like, for me, he just keeps yapping to him. You know, just if he can stop that, I feel like, you know, he'd get a bit of sympathy. But at the moment, you know, if you're playing well, talk all you want, just don't talk to the ref, you know, just, you know, get fired up with your team. I was even tempted to go Cortez and Noah in this game and then completely have TJ out of there. But it's just that experience of TJ. You feel like you should have it somewhere, but I haven't got it in the starting lineup. Instead, this is where I have got Cortez Ratama. The combination for the Chiefs, I've realised I'm slowly letting the team get taken over by Chiefs, adding Wallace Satiti into the starting lineup. But for yourself, you gone with that same combo, or have you got a major switch? I know you're a fan of Harry Plummer, played recently in the Bunnings NBC for Auckland. Does he also like Tui Pelotu? Get into your side.
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately not in this case. I think they have to stick with the same pairing. I've gone with Cortez Ratama number 9 and Damian McKenzie number 10. I think you got to give them another go. I think in that ball game, like you said, it's not actually, I don't think they did anything wrong in the game. It was one of those games that just didn't go in their favor and how the ball went out to them, kind of like what they're able to do in terms of like attacking plays and all that. Again, look, the only kind of downside, well, not downside, but like really negative I can put on any of their games was that one kick from McKenzie where he could have kind of taken the lead back for the All Blacks. But it's just one of those where I think at the end of the day, it's just a minor decision, and it just you can't really do much about it really. But I think Cortez like it's not a bad thing. I just didn't see enough of him in the game to kind of say anything really if there was a bad or good game or enough to kind of just put him right out of the team or not. So I think just give him another go. I think he deserves it, and I think, like you said, just that combination, they're used to each other, so why not just give it a go against the Wallabies?
Alrighty, so now we move on to the centre pairing. Have you made a bold switch here, or have you once again gone with Jordie Barrett and Rieko Ioane?
Well, I have made a bold switch because I originally did go with Jordie Barrett and Billy Proctor to start in that second test against the Springboks. So I thought that was what was needed, but the more I look at, I was like, wow. I mean, like they weren't able to. Again, it's just a similar situation where they weren't able to do much in that back line, and I'm like, just give it another go, really. So I've gone with Jordy Barrett and Rieko Ioane, and then my 13 jersey. I put him back in the side, and I think, yeah, it's just why not just do it? I can't really think of a reason why.
He was in the side, Tim. He was at number 13.
No, I know. So I'm just trying to say, like, why not just give it a go again? I'm just like, it's one of those where I think, like, if they want a Billy Proctor or Alexander Brown, I wouldn't mind it, actually. I just think I consider more likely in the second test to do something like that, because it's one of those games where maybe if they don't win the first one, then that's where you have to make a decision, maybe. But for now, I think just stick with Rieko.
So for myself, Rieko Ioane is an interesting player at the moment, because I do think that Barrett has found more form than he had at the start of the Rugby Championship as well as the July Internationals.
Oh, for sure. There was the one game where he was just off it, but he's definitely improved since then, yeah.
Whereas Rieko, he's had one good game. This last game, once again, I mentioned about it in my video, and I was quite critical. I said that he pretty much had the resume down for being Damian McKenzie's shadow in that last game, because every time that they tried to get something going, Rieko was like right behind McKenzie.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like he was lost in that back line. So if I had to sum up my expression of how Rieko keeps on getting into the side, I found a picture, and I feel like it's the perfect one, and it's relevant. In this case, it's this one, Tim. How does the man keep on getting selected at 13 when you've got other options? Anton Leonard-Brown, doing decently. I feel like he's slowly losing form because they won't give him opportunities. Billy Proctor, he had his first minutes up against Tasman in the Ranfurly Shield in how long? It's almost one of his first games since, I believe, that game up against the Fijians. He's maybe losing a little bit of form. They didn't strike while the iron was hot, and now they're in that situation of they're almost too deep in it that they can't really afford to now take Rieko out, even though I believe they should have. So for me, I've gone with Jordy Barrett, Rieko Ioane. I'm not happy about it, Tim. I feel like we need to see that switch, and it's the Wallace Satiti situation. Given those guys from Super Rugby who were in form the opportunity to prove their form, maybe exactly what that backline needed, because a backline that the All Blacks selected shouldn't be not scoring a single try in a match. And you're in that situation of certain players,
I think I think there's a player who we're going to get onto who it's not even close to Rieko, because like you said, Rieko actually had a good game in that second test. That's actually one of the games you can actually
First test. Second test, he was all right, but it's just on attack, we're not seeing it.
I understand, like, from a, you want to get tries at the end of the day. So, you want to obviously get some tries in there. But, man, I mean, there's a play we'll get on to shortly. But I think that 12-13 combination, I think it's one of those where they want experience at the end of the day. And when you're going into that first test for the Bledisloe Cup, you want to make sure you win it. Like, you don't want anything to kind of backfire in your way of where you're like, okay, you chose Billy Proctor to kind of go into this test. If it backfires, then oh my gosh, that's going to be like another thing added to Scott Robinson that we don't want to see, because there's this whole army now where, like, Razor, like, he's going into, what is his record now? He has what, 4-7, or is it
1-4 lost 3? I think it is.
It's something along those lines. I think it's like 4-7, and I think it's not a good record to have really for your first year. But at the same time, you need to, like, develop. So I understand there's a lot of transition kind of going on, and that's understandable. But it's again, we've seen this in previous coaches like Razzie, and kind of like they have to give them time to kind of build that squad that you want. And so I'm not saying anything negative about Razor, because I think there's a lot of improvement, that it's just minor changes that are needed. But I think in those centers, I don't think that's where the minor change is. I think both of them are just the best combination they have, hands down. And we saw that with Ian Foster. Like, why not just use what Ian Foster gave you in that? Like, because that's probably one of the few things I think we agree on that Ian Foster actually did. Like, we were like, you and me, we could openly say we were at times, a lot of the things he kind of went for, we were like, I'm not sure that's the right move. But to be fair, Barrett and Rieko, we never saw them as a center combination. I was like, what are they doing here? It's like, he's a winger, he's a fullback. What are you doing here? But actually, it paid off pretty well, actually, in terms of the development those two had. So I think, to give credit to Ian Foster, I think it's just one of those things where I think Razor can't really take away right now, unless there's a big injury, or I don't know, maybe if Geordie's time at Leinster, I don't know, something happens there, but I think for now, just keep the same too. I think the bigger conversation is around Geordie. Is there another player that could fill that 12 jersey that the ABs have currently? And I can't think of a player. That's the worrying problem. I don't think there's a big 12, like a big 12. I'm saying Anton Brown, of course, can play 12, but do you see him as a 12? Like, do you see him as a 12 or more as a 13?
I think that if you're basing it off Super Rugby Pacific, you could say that Anton Lienert-Brown would have done very well in that 12 jersey because, yes, maybe he doesn't quite have that same size as Jordie Barrett, but I also think that you'd shore up a little bit when it comes to working out who's actually going to be doing what in that back line, because the All Blacks, you've got Ratama who can kick, or TJ. In that case, you've got McKenzie who likes to kick. You've got Barrett who likes to kick. You've got Bowden at 15 who likes to kick. And you're in that situation. Sever Reese, he likes to kick. So having someone like an Anton Lienert-Brown that, yes, would kick maybe occasionally, but also knowing his role is to run it up. Because I always thought Jordie Barrett, the reason they had him in there was for the long kicks. Yet we saw in that second game up against South Africa, 50 metres out, he goes, no, I'm good.
McKenzie.
Give it to McKenzie, who was like 10 metres short for the kick. So
I was a bit surprised with that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're trying to build something, and I'm curious to see where the finish line is, because I do still think we're quite far away from said finish line. Because
sorry to cut you off here, but I can think of a 12 which you would appreciate a lot. Like, who 12 that could be, who could step up. I mean, you always like him a lot, but there's a reason we talk about him a lot in our videos for the Hurricanes.
Well, you're going Riley Higgins.
Riley Higgins. Is he the next 12?
You don't want to see what his defence was like in that game of the Ranfurly Shield. The bloke decided to try and tackle the ball, not the player, and he cost them the game. But other than that, he was pretty strong throughout the game. He was actually playing out on the wing for that contest, though, so we'll let it slide. But
I wish Bryce Heem, by the way, was like 10 years younger. If he was like 10 years younger, I'd be like, put him in the ABs. I'd like, he just is he's like the only battering ram I can think that in terms of AB players I can think of, like, there's not really one out there. And
what about AJ
is there someone I can think
Lamb?
of?
Could he be maybe an option in the future?
Oh, he has been playing there actually to be fair, actually, sorry, there is actually a player I've completely not mentioned him already. Quintu Pai, actually, he's probably the only player that could actually step up. But again, he wasn't selected, and I think it was his first season back really for the Chiefs. So he had to kind of adjust back towards it. But he did play well. But I think he just needs another season before he can kind of, I guess, get selected again. But anyway, we're good off track here. Who's your outside backs then?
Well, I have had to make a switch here, and I've made quite a few because, unfortunately, Sever Reese 2 games in a row has been, I don't know what you can say other than just awful. I want to try and give the bloke credit, but I can't think of too much that went his way in that game up against the South Africans. Like, maybe I don't even know if he had many runs throughout the game. And his form from Super Rugby, he is one of those guys that definitely hasn't translated into the Rugby Championship. But then first game up against England, he was pretty much man of the match. So I don't know what's happened between there and now, but just not quite working for Sever Reese. So first of all, out on the left wing, I have gone with Caleb Clark. I think that his form has transferred over from that Super Rugby Pacific season. Number 14, this is where I've actually gone back to Will Jordan, because I also feel like Will Jordan, I talked about it in my post kind of All Blacks XV video as well. I think while Will Jordan is scoring tries on that right wing, there isn't much point trying to change that. He's had a couple games at 15 now, and he hasn't been successful. I think that that's also based off who else they've got in the back line. So I believe if they really want to commit Jordan to 15, they need to build a back line around him, but they haven't done that yet. So that is why I put him back out on the right wing. He'll still give you a decent performance. Yes, he might only touch the ball 5 or so times, but you're surely going to get maybe a try assist or a try amongst it. So I've gone with him at 14, and then number 15, this is where I've gone back to Bowden Barrett. I liked him off the bench in those games up against England, that last match up against South Africa, which of course we can't base the whole of the All Blacks off, because every once in a while you're going to have an off game, but it just seems like Barrett's experience in that starting 15 jersey and having that option of running that ball from the back is very important at the moment, because Will Jordan, we thought that's what we were going to see, but we didn't really see it. Unfortunately, he had to take on more of that kicking it back downfield and giving it to South Africa kind of role. But yeah,
Yeah.
Bowden's my number 15 for this matchup.
The more you said now, it was actually one of those games where I expected a lot more Will Jordan to have a lot more opportunities on the run. But yeah, just it's one of those games where, I mean, I guess cleverly from the box, they kind of just said, no, we're going to make this a kicking game, really, and kind of just test out your ability there. But yeah, with my back three here, I believe Razor will go with. I've also gone with Caleb Clark, the number 11 jersey. I think that's something he was hands down the best, I guess, outside back throughout that tour of South Africa. I thought he was brilliant in that first test, particularly getting 2 tries to his name. So yeah, he's definitely the first name in the team sheet here. Will Jordan is the interesting one because will Razor keep him at, like, will he put him back to 14 or will he give him another go at 15? And I actually think he'll give him another go at 15. So in this case, I've actually gone Mark Talea to be the number 14. And we haven't seen this so far. We haven't seen Caleb Clark, Mark Talea, and Will Jordan as kind of the back three. So I'd like to see it happen. And why not against the Australian team, which was leaking tries in that last game? And I mean, Caleb Clark and Mark Talea are just like the most dangerous runners you could have. And with Will Jordan there, it's just like the cherry on top, really. So I'd like to see it happen. And look, it's harsh on Beauden Barrett because I think, like you said, he's been brilliant actually for Razor. He's one of the, like, if you name like a top 3 in terms of who's actually stood out, I think out of Razor's time so far, I say Beauden Barrett's one of those 3 players. So it's harsh on him, but I think just for the context of this game of who they're facing, the Wallabies, I'd rather see Jordan at 15. So yeah, I think that's what Razor could do as well. So we'll see if it happens or not.
Something else to very quickly brush upon about Will Jordan. Did you see what I saw in regards of his security under the high ball didn't look anything like it used to? Just in that, like that moment, it seemed like he was hesitant to come forward. I do think that's also from a lack of minutes at 15. So you might be onto something there that they decide to leave him for longer. But yeah, like we used to see Will Jordan just glide up, get that ball and go, but just wasn't really able to line it up, had a few handling errors along the way. But it can only get better, I think, for Will Jordan as well as Sever Reece. Well, can it get worse for Reece? Maybe. I mean, it did in the last game.
I don't want to talk too much about Reece because I feel bad for him just because it's one of those, he just had 2 horrible games. Like, it's just one of the, like, but at the end of the day, any player can have that. So it's not like you can kind of just bounce back from that. And if he gets selected in this test, fair play. It's an amazing game. He kind of just writes all those headers off. So like, I'd love to see that happen, but just I do think they need a switch there. So that's the reason why with Mark Talea. And I think he's just he's a danger when you want him to be. So that's why I've gone with him ahead of Reece there.
Righty, so now we move on to the benches. I assume you've gone 5-3 split here?
Indeed.
Alrighty, so your front row replacements, who have you got in those 3 jerseys?
So for my front row off the bench, I have gone with Safa Moore as my replacement hooker. I think he's just the standout really there. I wouldn't be surprised actually if they went with George Bell, but I just think you got to kind of take the test seriously in terms of Sydney and first Bledisloe test. You got to take it highly as possible. So I've gone with Safa Moore there off the bench. Then I've gone with Ethan de Groot, number 17. Again, if you're going to announce that he's coming back into the side, then you're definitely going to put him in somehow in here. And I think bench is probably the best place for him and kind of getting him bits more minutes before he kind of starts, I believe. And then this is where I've gone with Pascal Tosi. So I've done it. This is probably the one selection again where I've probably had my say in this. Not Razor, and I'd like to see him get some minutes in this game, but the funny feeling it may not happen, and they probably will just go with like Alpha in this case to play number 3. But we'll see.
Could they put to Mighty Williams as that replacement tie head, and then have de Groot in the starting lineup?
Maybe.
I'd like to think that they'd at least slightly back Vasilio Tosi, though. That is what I've gone with as my number 18, same as yourself and the other 2 as well. Safa Moore, number 16, number 17, Ethan de Groot. Vasilio Tosi, this injury of Null might actually be his opportunity to really break out because he had a great game up against the Fijians and he looked dangerous with ball in hand. I feel like the big question will be the scrums, though, because that is the reason that Fletcher Null has been selected so many times. I also saw quite a few articles about how, now that Null's not there, New Zealand are in a bit of trouble when it comes to that replacement tie here. But I don't think they've watched Vasilio Tosi enough.
Exactly.
That man has got so much potential and he just needs the chance to be able to prove it. So hopefully this game is the one. Plus, if he's partnered with Ethan de Groot and a Safa Moore, that is a pretty strong front row to have coming off the bench. Nonetheless, moving on to the next 2 positions, I've gone with Patrick Tuipulotu as my number 19, and I've gone with Ethan Blackadder as my number 20. Reason being versatility. Blackadder can play either 6, 7 or 8 rather than having someone like a Satiti off the bench, because I do feel he's done enough in that last game to earn some sort of spot in this 23-man side. Tui Pelotu, I thought he was strong up against Northland, has made his way back into the team now, and, you know, I don't think he had any injuries from that contest. He managed to score himself a try, looking strong throughout. I definitely have him in this lineup somewhere, and that adds you a little bit more experience off the bench, which maybe is something that the All Blacks have really been lacking. Sam Derry's been good, don't get me wrong, but it just seems like Scott Robertson isn't willing to give Derry 20 minutes at the end of the game. It's more like he's willing to give him 3 or 4, and that's just not enough time, you know.
Yeah.
Tui Pelotu, maybe he's more likely to give him 20, 25 at the end and say, go on, go out there and use that experience and help us get a win. So those are my 2 in the loose forward and lock.
No, fair enough. In this case, I have gone with Sam Derry to come off the bench here. I think, you know, with me and Razor going with the same thinking, hopefully, with 3 locks in the starting lineup, you definitely need cover there. So that's definitely the reason why I've gone with Sam Derry off the bench. And similar to you, I've also gone with Ethan Blackadder because I think he can cover 6 if he did 7 or 8. So it's just another good player to have. I think Sam Cade's been a bit unfortunate here because I think, you know, he didn't play half bad actually against the Box. I just think it's one of those where, was he the right player to play into them? I don't know. I think they needed a better player in terms of kind of the breakdown, but at the same time, he's not a bad player to have. And again, like you said before, he'll definitely reach the 100 cap mark. So I wouldn't be surprised if they actually put him in this game.
I'm just going to quickly throw it out there. If we have an Ethan Blackadder injury that is still there, for myself, I'd probably change my number 20 to Luke Jacobson. But for yourself, who would you have? Would you give Sam Cane that number 20 jersey in that case, or would you go with Jacobson, theoretically, if you were in charge?
I think for like the way I've done my side, I'd have to say Luke Jacobson because he covers more positions. But if I could say what Razor would probably do, I'd say Sam Cane.
Righty, so now we have the 3 positions left. These are the big ones to make the decisions about, because you've got certain guys that maybe aren't in the best form that you're going to try and play in these positions. You've also got guys that you need to change a game if it is close in the final moments. For yourself, who have you gone with?
Yeah, so I've gone with TJ at the number 21 spot. Again, we kind of discussed him before. I think he's just, you can go with no Holtman here if you wanted to, but I just don't think they'll do it. I think just TJ's a better player off the bench anyway, so I kind of like his experience there. Following him, this is where I've gone with Bowden Barrett. I think you've got to have him involved in this squad somehow. So I've gone with the number 22 jersey. And finish it off, this is where I've gone with Anthony Brown as the final position there. I think, you know, again, he can cover a lot of positions, and I think it's just a good player to have, solid player throughout. So, yeah, that's my 23-man squad there.
Okay, so I've got one change to yourself. I've got TJ Perenara as the number 21, even though this kind of game, I believe, up against the Australians would be the perfect time to give someone like a Noah Hotham a crack. You're also in that situation, though, of Cam Roigard is not too far away from coming back. So if they are going to fast track him back into that All Black squad, you got to decide who's that guy that's going to have to hop off and get out of that side. At the moment, I know that this is really bold, but I'd almost say it's TJ that you'd have to look at as.
Oh, it's definitely TJ. It's not even close.
Out.
Yeah, no, it's definitely
and
TJ.
Then, yeah, you've got Noah Hotham, a young guy that I think, because Scott Robertson is the coach, is going to get hopefully quite a few opportunities throughout his young career, because the problem we've got at the moment with him is these are games that I believe he should be playing in the NPC and should be getting as many minutes under his belt as he can. But the problem is he plays for the Tasman Marcos. And you know who's getting most of the starting minutes in that team? Finley Christie. And he's not giving those up anytime soon. I can tell you that right now, because he also wants to make his way back into this AB's camp. But yeah, TJ, he's got that experience. Hopefully has a solid enough game off the bench. I do feel he is better at controlling a game when the All Blacks are leading, though, late in a game, rather than what happened in the contest up against South Africa, how it just seemed like they were a little bit muddled, and also the breakdowns just slowed down immensely throughout those final moments for New Zealand.
You guys were good, though. New Zealand was really good in the breakdown.
Were good.
Hey, I got to credit. You know, New Zealand was incredible actually in the breakdown. They were better than South Africa, which is like, you don't normally hear that, by the way. Like, a team better, like, got more penalties for the breakdown than South Africa. So That's pretty good to kind of build upon, really, going into this test against the Wallabies. So if they can do more of that, then yeah, they're gonna have a lot of ball retention, really, and that's exactly what they need.
It's just that ruck speed, isn't it, in terms of whether or not they can get that ball out quick enough to create those opportunities that you mentioned. Number 22, I have gone with Anton Lienert-Brown. I've decided to give him another crack there. And then number 23, this is actually where I've got Mark Talia. I feel like that's something that they've tried in the past of bringing him off the bench later on in the contest. I would like some changes, to be honest. I also feel like Stephen Perofeta is not too far away from possibly being back as well for the All Blacks. So perhaps we start to see the opportunity for Perofeta at 15 again, or
Ruben Love?
Something along those? Nah. I don't know. I think that Ruben Love, watching him in the Ranfurly Shield game up against Tasman, yes, it's one game to base it off, but he did seem very flustered in a pressure situation. Like, he tried to grub it. It was stopped by a prop who then ran down the field and scored the try, or at least assisted the try for Tasman. And, you know, it's just those little moments. Once again, not getting enough game time, I don't believe, to keep that form from Super Rugby. Also ended up with a knee injury near the end of the game, though, that took him out. So hopefully not as serious as a Super Rugby one, but you never know, do you? It's one of those ones that some of the ones that don't look that bad are actually the ones that are quite serious. So hopefully he's going to be back soon, and we either see him in the ABs or maybe in Wellington again. But nonetheless, that is our starting lineup that we believe Scott Robertson will be going with for this weekend up against the Wallabies. Bledisloe Cup match 1. It is going to be an epic one, and as soon as the sides are announced, we will be letting you know on the channel as well. But a big thank you for Rugbyitch coming on the channel. If you do want to check out his channel, his link is in the description as well as the pinned comment. Let us know who you think Razor will be going with in the comments as well. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and we will see you all for the next one.